Okay, we're recording. So this is to officially welcome everyone to this session of Lessons Learned, facilitated by myself and Karen Armstrong. This is an opportunity for congregations across the country to come together and share what's going on during this extraordinary time in our faith's history and the history of our congregations. I am located in Springfield, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia. I am a member of the UU Church of Delaware County in Media, Pennsylvania. I have been a member for 27 years, have pretty much done everything except make coffee, and I am now on the third round of serving on the board. I just joined the board again as the vice president. I am also a former member of the Central East region of the UUA, and I am still an adjunct staff with the region, and I have my own website, and I'm available to provide consultant services to congregations. So if your board, if your leadership, if your congregation has a need to come together during this time, and I think we do need to, I'm available to facilitate, to instruct, to consult, etc. I want to introduce my colleague and partner, Karen Armstrong. Karen?
Thanks, Mark. I'm really glad to be here. I'm representing UUAMP, UU Association of Membership Professionals. I serve on the board of that professional organization, and I'm happy to serve there. It's a wonderful group. I also am the staff membership manager for the UU Fellowship of Winston-Salem in Central North Carolina. I've been there in a few weeks. And I am talking to you from home because we have been essentially closed since mid-March. I'm happy to be here because I think navigating these waters together is better than doing it alone.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So what I want to do is just a really brief introduction before we open it up for conversation and sharing and learning together. And so, folks, it's not over yet. The statistics, the numbers are as frightening as they were when this all started. At least 33 states in the country experienced an increase in new coronavirus cases compared to last week. New cases of the disease have reached 60,000 per day, all-time highs. Nearly 1 in 100 Americans have now tested positive for the virus. So where we thought maybe a month or so ago this was starting to be on the decline, we find that we are not by any means out of the woods. Many of you are aware of the statement from the UUA Safe Congregations team. It was broadcast in a message from the UUA president. This was in May. In the midst of uncertainty, whoops, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Talk about uncertainty. There we go, okay. It is the UUA's strong recommendation that congregations plan for ongoing virtual gathering and operations through May 2021. This applies to worship, events, committee meetings, staff meetings, one-on-one visits, rites of passage, and more. While smaller gatherings may be able to resume sooner if conditions improve, planning for virtual operations that could continue for a full year is advisable. This is not mandatory. Nothing that comes from the UUA is mandatory. We have congregational polity. But this was a statement that came out several weeks ago now as a guideline. And the wording is interesting. The recommendation is not that we do not open until May 2021, but that we plan for ongoing virtual gathering and operations through May 2021. It's a subtle difference. I also wanted to share with you the statement from the UUA Safe Congregations team regarding outdoor gatherings. I'll ask you to share this when we begin our conversation, but many congregations are itching to at least get together outdoors. So here's what the UU has said about that. Data show that the risks of transmission of COVID-19 are lower in outdoor settings. However, experts advise that facial coverings, physical distancing, and limits on singing still be in place. If you are considering holding an outdoor gathering of 2 or more people, we urge you to establish plans and guidelines to keep our most vulnerable participants safer from the possibility of COVID transmission. And that includes, this isn't a complete list, but no communal singing. This is outdoors now. No food service. Bathrooms that are frequently cleaned and well ventilated. If you make bathrooms available to people. Masks and facial coverings, adequate hand washing and hand sanitation supplies, inclusive and accessible spaces for sitting. And for many people with mobility issues, grass is not an appropriate or a comfortable place to sit or to move if they use a walker or a wheelchair. Methods for including people who are hard of hearing and or visually impaired if you're outdoors, especially given the obstacles of distance and mass. So we also need to be sure that we're being accessible. So these are the questions that I hope that we will ponder and discuss and ask and answer as we spend our time together today. As we adjust to church life in the virtual age, what are we learning? What have you learned so far? What are our challenges? And what innovative solutions are we implementing? As we look ahead to the next few weeks and months, what is the plan? What is your plan for moving forward? And how do we see our congregations differently now and in the future? And I'll share as we go through our time together some of the answers that we've come up with so far in my congregation. One more thing I'd like to do before we start a conversation is to do a quick poll with 2 questions. We asked these questions 2 months ago, and we thought it would be interesting to ask them again and compare the results. So here's the first question, and these answers are anonymous, so you don't have to hesitate to answer honestly. What is your best guess as to when your congregation will resume in-person worship services? By the end of the summer, September, October, November, December, sometime after January 1st, or not until May 2021. So based on your knowledge and your position in the congregation, what answer would you give? Okay, thank you. Karen, can you see the results? You can't see the results yet, can you? I can't.
Yes, I can see them.
Oh, they're up there? Okay, I wasn't sure. So you can see that 88% of you aren't planning on coming together personally until sometime after January 1st. And almost half of you not until May 2021, which is a little surprising to me. That at this point, so far away, Karina, you can't see, can you see the poll results, Karen?
Yes, I see them. It's just the.
Oh, you're a co-host. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
Wait a
right.
minute. That's why. I'm sorry, folks. Wait. Let me. Here we go. I'll share the results now. There we go. You can see them now. Yes. Yay. Okay. 11% November, December. I really, as we get started, I'd like to hear from those 2 folks where you are with that. But as you can see, the vast majority aren't going to start until next year, and almost half of you don't think you'll start until May. I can't put this up on the screen, but I can share that 2 months ago when we did this first round, 14% thought they would open in September, October. Another 14% November, December. So 28% expected to open up this year. That's changed drastically. And then it also asked how many thought they would open after January 1st, and that was 71%. We didn't have the not until May 2021 back then. But much larger percentage now are looking at starting well after January 1st. So that's anything. Karen, I know there were a couple of chats that came through. Do you want to check them out and just share what folks said in response to this first question?
Sure, that's kind of qualifying some of the answers, I think. Officially, we are reassessing in September, but my bet is that we won't gather until next year. That's from Jeanette. And Reverend Ben says, this is our planning, all caps. We're willing to meet sooner. Contingent on successful vaccine and reassessing in January, but will most likely open in May. So yeah, these are real different than the first sessions.
Yeah, I think we're more of us are coming to grips with the fact that we're not going to be back together in person anytime soon. Let me figure out, give me a second, how to get to the second question. Second question, where are you? Here we go. Second question had to do with planning. Where is your congregation in terms of planning for a reopening? Where is your congregation in terms of planning for reopening? We haven't started yet. We're just beginning a planning process. We have one underway. We have a plan in place, which of course will be subject to modifications, or I really don't know because nobody tells me anything in this congregation. And this time I'll remember to show you the results before I start sharing them. So we're waiting for one more person to chime in. There we go. Thank you. So here are the results. Yep. 11% haven't started a process yet. Again, I'd love to hear from you. And those that are just beginning the planning process, and 39%, and I think that's pretty significant. So half of you really haven't started yet or are just getting started. 39%, we have a planning process underway. 6%, we have a plan in place, and 11% aren't sure. To compare with 2 months ago, 53% said they haven't started a planning process yet, as compared to 11% with you folks. 32% were just beginning a planning process. Only 5% had a planning process underway, and nobody had a plan in place. So we're certainly, as a group, making progress in terms of getting a plan together, or having a plan that you have in place for now, which of course might be subject to modifications. So thank you for doing the polling. Karen, comments?
Yes, Chayla says that the new board is about to begin at her congregation, so she suspects they'll be discussing that. And Reverend Ben said they already had part of a plan in place because of some renovations that they were doing.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to open it up now. I see Jeanette already has her hand up, which is great. Again, this is an opportunity to just share where you are, where you're going, ask questions, offer information to each other. The conversations that we had 2 months ago were really freewheeling and open, and went in all different directions. We want to make sure that it meets your needs. So no holds barred. So Jeanette, would you like to get us started?
Sure. So in our county, we have the public health order is not just like a blanket public health order. they divided it into industry groups, and there's task forces that met in different industry groups, including faith-based, which I actually got to sit on and continue to sit on, and a whole bunch of other things. Office space was one of them. And so in that poll, I actually ended up picking two options. One was having a plan in place, and one was we're starting it or something. I forget the third to last one, because we have an office space site plan, and then the faith-based site plan is in process because you're not supposed to gather at all indoors. And then California, probably a lot of people heard in the news, California has just taken a major step back, and that includes office space. So we were about to introduce a site-specific plan for opening office space, which could have included some rentals, especially 12-step groups that I could put in really, bigger rooms to allow for distancing and with a lot of restrictions. But now it just seems like that might be just sort of out the window. So there are different ways to look at reopening. And then the outdoor space just feels like there's going to be so many opinions. And so I have concerns about just people will make up in their heads what seems okay and what doesn't, not necessarily based on, reality.
Thanks, Jeanette. There's a lot there. The issue of rentals is a particular issue because you can allow rentals into your building and not the congregation, but how are you going to monitor their adherence to whatever safety measures you want to implement? So that's fraught with issues as well.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and everyone has an opinion. We have a task force that they didn't invite me to meet with them until weeks later. And then all of a sudden I'm bringing them a lot of information from the county and from other sources that I have, because I sit on a whole nother task force that's just about event venues. And they're like, whoa, we should have invited you weeks ago. And there's just a lot of information that they didn't know. And so I think just by the county actually gave everyone a template for site-specific plans, by having them actually see the detail that had to be broken down. I think that's when they kind of started stepping back and realizing that we just need to communicate that the building is officially closed, and that, we don't have plans to reopen at this time. I mean, officially they're going to reassess in September, but, probably it's going to stay online.
yeah, thank you, Jeanette. I'm wondering, others, what are you saying to your congregation right now? What's the official position on the part of the leadership, if there is one? Nancy?
So we have a task force that started shortly after I came to this previous meeting, this group. And so we talked quite a while before we publicized anything about our existence. We should have been a little faster on that. And so we're saying that the building is closed, but we are making outdoor defined spaces available with certain regulations. There are people that are very anxious for groups to meet inside the building. And so some of those people are hard to resist, but we're not going to play favorites. And one of your suggestions at the meeting a couple months ago was that we stay apprised of our congregation's feelings. And so we're beginning to get those just recently.
Great, thank you, Nancy. That's one of the problems with opening the doors, even to the grounds, is, if you open it to some, you have to open it to all. And even vulnerable populations like older people or people with, medical conditions. And And then if you have to then back up and say, well, no, wait a minute, we want to open it to everyone, but you know, if you're over 65, please don't come onto the grounds. I mean, it can get pretty sticky. Is there anybody else, I'm wondering, that has opened up the grounds, the church grounds, to congregants? Karen and
Yes,
Karina, Ed.
I just
Karen?
wanted to mention the chat while I've got my mic
Yeah.
off. Is there quite a few comments about different processes and different place people are in, especially as in regards to rentals because of income. And there's also a request, several actually, to share, anyone who actually has a plan to share it widely with others.
Sure. Karina, you know, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, Karina. If you want to raise your hand, that's fine. I may miss you though. So if you want to make sure that I see you, raising your hand electronically is probably the best way. But just if you do wave wildly so I can see you. Go ahead, Karina. I'm sorry.
That's okay, no problem. We haven't really officially opened up our campus at all, but we do have our landscape committee who's been working on the grounds, and they are practicing social or physical distancing and, you know, staying masked. Although we do have some people going rogue a little bit, and there was a comment earlier that made me think, you know, people have one way, they're like, I think I'm being safe, you know, and they have they're by themselves, but they happen to be standing on our hill. So as people walk, you know, drive past, they see people congregating next to our church without masks. So it is problematic. I think people have good intentions.
Yeah, I think optimistically speaking, people have good intentions. David.
Okay, being here in the middle of the country, we're kind of in a lag position. And in terms of use of the building, the thing is we have had and continue to have a preschool nursery that does and has continued to use the building. So that, as you say, makes it somewhat problematic because people are aware that the building is not altogether closed. The administrator works in the building and there's this preschool. And as you suggest, we are feeling pressure. Our task force has met a couple times, and with uncertainties with the summer being kind of a tourist area and not having many cases at all until now, we hesitated. And then all of a sudden we find out that there are groups that have the expectation of using the facility. And so we're kind of right now, like today, needing to do a backup clamp down decision-making thing.
Yeah. Who, David, I'm just curious, is the day school under the auspices of the congregation? Of the church?
It's a rental arrangement. It's a university day school, and they're essentially a whole wing of the building during the week has been for their use historically. And we maintain their enrollment, you know, dropped significantly, and they've taken many precautions and pretty much just use the classroom area down, as I say, one passageway, but they do come through and the staff uses the kitchen and parents bring the children and depart with the children. So,
and has that been continuous?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was a little surprised too. Yeah, it never stayed. They thought they were going to need to stop, but with PPP money to hold their staff and enough parents, essential jobs, needing a place to bring the children, it's a small number. I've been in the building. You hear them down the hall occasionally, but not that many. But it's been continuous.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, David. Karen, some stuff on chat related to this.
Yes, it's an active chat. Definitely some more conversation about rentals, and then Reverend Ben's church is a sanctuary church, so they have a guest that's living there that keeps their building open. Wow. And some rules around that. A couple of people have mentioned staff kind of monitoring and enforcing use of the building and grounds policies. So that's kind of a summary.
Thank you. I also noticed that Ben used the building is closed, but the church is open. Our religious education director likes to use that phrase also. We're open, which is great, but when people hear open, they think physically open. Oh, good, I can go into the building. So I understand the sentiment behind it, but it can also be confusing, I think, to people. You're open, but we can't go in the building, or we can't see you, or we can't hug you. I do want to share a little bit something that David said. We have a day school in our building that's under the auspices of our church, and we've had a pretty interesting time with them, which I'll share in just a little bit. Other comments? Sharing, where are you? Edson, thank you. You have to unmute.
We also have a preschool, and the current plan, although we haven't made any plans about reopening the church itself, the school is planning to open in September. Physically, they can be separated from the rest of the church since they occupy the basement floor. So probably what we will do is allow them to open, whether we allow other renters in or not. We haven't decided.
Thanks, Ed. I just want to acknowledge Ben saying the church is not the building, it's the people, and you're absolutely right. I also found it intriguing that your congregation will open as a community center, and I think that's great. And so, similar to your congregation, Reverend Ben, we have a day school that has petitioned the board, which I am now a member of, to open. They want to open at the end of this month or in August. And the conversation began before I joined the board. After some extensive conversations and an extremely thorough proposal from the day school, we granted them permission to open up, but under very, very strict guidelines, which it sounds like you're doing out there in San Francisco. Which is a criteria they're using that we're adopting for when we as a congregation open. And I just want to share that with you. The county that we are in is Delaware County. And they're, at the time of their proposal, there were an average weekly number of confirmed cases that was 29, the number 29. And so they use that as a benchmark. And the criteria for opening is that no more than 29 confirmed cases of COVID-19 for 3 weeks prior to reopening, which is pretty stringent because the normal period of time is the 14 days. So they won't open until the number of COVID cases in the county is 29 or below for 3 weeks. If after opening that number rises above 29, then they will meet with the board and discuss whether they should close. And that's kind of ambiguous, I understand, but we held them to some pretty rigorous criteria for opening and requirements for closing again. They're also comparing numbers with 8 other child care centers within 12 miles of the program, and they're going to monitor those cases and whether or not there are any positive COVID cases in those child care centers. So that's kind of this very rigid criteria that they're using to reopen. And our plan in my congregation is really piggybacking on that. And we are creating some pretty stringent criteria for reopening. We have said to our congregation, we're not going to give you a timeline. We're not going to tell you that we're going to open in September, and then in September say, well, we hope to open by December. We bandied that around in the beginning, and then realized that it's not a timeline. It's whenever the virus says it's okay, you can come together now. It's the criteria that will bring us back together, not by a certain date. And that's a lesson that we've learned and that we're really sticking to it. So if a member of the congregation asks, well, can you give us an idea of when? No, we can't. It all depends on when we see a certain number of cases for 3 weeks, not rising above that number. And then we'll know that it's safe to begin re-entering with all of the safety measures that we've all become very familiar with. Comments, reactions, questions, sharing from what your congregation is doing?
Yeah, just a reaction, those numbers of 29, the thing is where we are in the Duluth area, South Shore area, that 29 is still high from where we are.
Yeah, understood.
Which is why we have this ambivalence. It's been very much lower, but with this season and the holidays and people coming up, we're seeing it rising, and that's why we're putting on brakes. But hearing that you at least have an attempt at criteria is what I've been listening for.
Yeah.
And if we can work out something of that nature, it will help a lot.
Absolutely. And it's something that your task force and your leadership can hold on to. You stick to the criteria. And David, you're right that 29 is not an absolute number. It's per capita. Delaware County we're a suburb of Philadelphia. We're a very populous county. So in more rural areas, that number is going to be a lot lower. Chayla.
Yeah, so in our situation, at least, prior to the new board starting, the statements that were made relied upon the directives from both the governor and the CDC and the county. And so to some degree, it allowed the governmental restrictions to be the bad cop, as it were. So, and although people are homesick for one another, I think there is a fundamental trust in objective science. So there's, so people are recognizing the angst of not being together physically, but just wanting to stay smart and sane and alive.
Thank you, Chayla. Our position in our task force is that we will be data driven, but we're also values driven. So we're not just going to rely on what our governor, or certainly not the executive office of the president, but not the governor or the mayor, and because it's also values driven. It's when we think it's the right time to go back, and that we can all come back, and that we can keep people safe. Michael, and then Sarah.
Yeah, we're in which may be unique, may not be, I guess it is, but we were part of that New York market, which flared, and so we were kind of in crisis mode. And then as things have gotten under better control, I think several of us were feeling more encouraged that, okay, by this fall, we'll be able to decide and blah, blah. And now the rest of the country is blowing up. So now, so every day we're kind of changing our own perspective about what safety might be. Our congregants are not really pushing us. A couple of people have asked, so what's the thoughts? And we've had a committee formed for almost a month, but haven't met yet. And we wanted to come to this meeting to get best practices from others, and then we will start meeting. But it's, being in New York feels safer, but now we're afraid of the rest of the world, whereas the rest of the world was afraid of us 2-3 months ago, right?
Absolutely.
So we have one tenant who is using our building alone for 2 hours a day to serve food, well-made, healthy food. But as far as there's nobody pushing us to come back or to do anything. So it makes us feel, I think, like we can take our time and be smart about how we proceed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would suggest, Michael, and the rest of the folks from South Fork, that as your task force begins to meet, to keep the congregation apprised. I'm sure they trust you and they're willing to wait right now. But a lesson that we've learned is that we need to be in constant contact with the congregation who are wondering what's going on, and are people looking at this. We have 3 subgroups in our task force. One is looking at establishing criteria for reopening and safety measures once we do reopen. A second is looking at how can we enhance our virtual services that we're providing now. And a third group, which I'm on, is has crafted a vision statement, a thought piece on what the congregation will look like moving forward. And we've couched it. It's an address from the president of the board at a meeting in 2026, looking back at the history of the congregation and what we did after the pandemic ended. And it was a really fun exercise to engage in. And what we want to do is we want to push the envelope. We want members of our congregation to realize that this is an opportunity where maybe we can rethink how we do church, that we don't have to go back to the way it was. Not that anybody wants to, but this is an opportunity to just let loose all of the things that have been holding us back. And what would it look like if we could be the church that we really want to be? So that might be a fun exercise that you might want to consider as well. Sarah, we're 4 minutes away from 2:00. I'm not rushing you, Sarah. I just want to let people know that I'm keeping an eye on the clock. So after Sarah, I will offer an opportunity to take a very short break, and if people need to leave, we can say goodbye. But Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, from the beginning, once the UUA said that we shouldn't, or we should plan on May 2021, we kind of just accepted that. And as our congregation has not been kind of high anxiety about this, I think everybody agrees with that, aside from a few people. And it's kind of taken the pressure off to just be constantly, adjusting and planning and just really digging into that anxiety that we feel could be better used to just reimagine and explore small group ministry in a different way, because we're finding that's very critical right now. And to find a way to slow down so that we can actually be creative and present to what this time calls for. Wonderful. That's so well put. Yeah. Look at this as really an extraordinary opportunity for us. Karen, I can't listen and read at the same time. Is there some notable things on the chat that?
Yes, actually, Sarah kind of just summarized it very well. Thank you, Sarah. I don't even know if she knew that. There's been some conversation about the importance of small group and the changing nature of Sunday services. And then also what you just recently said about the importance of the flow of information, even if there's not something to report, to stay in contact with people that the task force is happening. Gosh, there's a lot. Karina said there was some education on the front end about the importance of shutdown and what the basic rules of keeping everybody safe, accessibility, most vulnerable, that kind of stuff. So that has helped support task forces and reimagining our space, like Sarah just said.
Great, thank you, Karen. By the way, if you want to save this chat, if you haven't had a chance to read it all, if you go all the way down to the bottom where it says 2, on the right-hand side, there's the 3 dots. If you click on that, there's a menu, and at the top it'll say Save Chat. So if you want to hold on to that. any ideas that people had that you want to keep. It's 2:00. This hour really went quickly, at least for me it did. And I hope it didn't drag for some of you. I just want to take an opportunity to acknowledge that you did commit to be with us for an hour. So if you need to run to another Zoom meeting or just run away from your computer for a while, we understand. Thank you very much for being here. If you can hang on for another half an hour, we'll continue the discussion. So those that have to leave, thank you so much for being here. This will be recorded, including the next half hour. So we look for that either on the UUM website or Feel Good Consulting website. Well, most people are staying, Karen. I was going to leave. Great. Okay. Well, thank you for staying on. Michael, you have your hand up.
Yeah, you know, certain things are kind of coming. I really like what I think it was Reverend Ben said about opening as a community center. And we, as I put in the chat, you know, our preschool is said that their intention to open up in September, but they go by the school calendar. So if our schools don't open, then our preschool will probably not open. And then our yoga tenant said, well, you know, I don't really know. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? So we budgeted for a 50% reduction in our income, our rental income this year. And I'm seeing that, I'm feeling that kind of fade away. And our meditation group and our dance group and our ACOAs. And it's very, very possible that we may need to reimagine our space, our income, our stewardship. I mean, pretty much everything, because we can't go for multiple years losing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in income. So, and it appears less certain every week. And even if they do come back, there's been so much financial damage incurred by them, it appears, that they may not be able to pay at the rate that we have leases. So it's a challenge, but it's also an immense opportunity for us to reimagine who we are, our place in the community, and how we arrive at a stable financial place as a congregation.
Yeah, this is really a difficult issue for many congregations that rely heavily on rental income. I'm wondering, are in your congregations, if you are privy to it, are you seeing a reduction in people fulfilling their pledges? Is that an issue with anyone? People keeping up with their pledges? Karina?
I'm actually seeing the opposite. I'm seeing that people are really working hard to get their pledge payments in. You know, not everybody, of course, and there are people who are definitely struggling financially. We're in a situation where a lot of our members are retired and probably have a fixed income that hasn't been affected by this. So I think that's probably a little bit of it as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Karina. We're seeing our fiscal year ends June 30th. So what we've seen, and I can't compare it because this is my first year on the board after many years of not being on it, but we have a number of people in the congregation who have not yet paid their full pledge amount. And that might be partly because with all of this stuff going on, you get to the end of the fiscal year and people are intending on fulfilling the full amount and they either forget because they're not going to church or they may be running into some financial hardship and they're worried about committing that money because they might need it. So we're experiencing that. Michael, is your hand back up? Or did you leave it up before? Okay, it must be very tired right now. Other thoughts, folks that maybe we haven't heard from? What's going on in your congregation? Kirsten.
Well, let me just say that as the bookkeeper, as well as my job as congregational administrator, I feel very uncomfortable sending out pledge statements at this time because of not wanting people to feel the pressure. So that may happen maybe at the end of August, the beginning of September, just to make it kind of like a quarterly statement to let everybody know where they stand. But my big problem is that everybody's talking about keeping people communicated to make sure that people know what's going on. And we use a MailChimp program, which should be very easy. And once I get the information, it's sent out regularly. But keeping the it's that old adage of you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink it, because they're not reading. I get these reports. Unfortunately, I signed up for it on my phone, and now every time I send out one, 24 hours later, they say, well, this amount of people did not open your email blast. And how can we keep the congregation engaged when we're giving them the information? The website is up to date as much as possible, but they don't read it. I mean, I'm perplexed.
Kristen, how many people in your congregation?
111.
Okay, this may take a while, but here's my suggestion, and then I'm going to ask Karen to chime in. Invite yourself to dinner at each of your congregation's homes and sit down and have dinner with them and tell them what's going on. Not only will they get the information, but think of all the great free meals you'll have. So I'm being facetious. You can tell people even 7 different ways, 7 times, and there will be people that will say, how come you didn't tell us this?
Yeah.
Karen, and then Sherry, I got you next.
I assure you I didn't think of this on my own, but borrowed it from a colleague. We have about 320 members. And when we realized we were going to be doing this virtual longer and people were getting more and more discouraged and missing each other, I did a tech check-in, and I sent out 320 and I got back 105, which is a pretty big number for that kind of thing. Simple form on Breeze. We use Breeze, but it could be in Google or even MailChimp. And I asked, I'm happy to share the form if anybody wants to see it. It basically said, what do we need to do to make sure you get this information? Instead of, I've gave them all the different ways and a couple of very simple open-ended questions. And I got it out every way I could. Mail, just tried to get it as many ways out there as I could, and just talked it up. I try to be funny. I'm not very funny, but I try to be funny. So I say, I send out stuff. Nobody's reading our regular weekly newsletter either, Kirsten. They used to, but they're not. So I say, these are the links you've been waiting for, or something that would get their attention. And I'm trying to respond to what they said they wanted. It helps to have a care team that has basically split up the entire congregation. This is the first thing we did when we went home, and made sure everybody was getting contact. So whichever way, now we're tweaking it and making sure they're getting the contact that they want. It's huge. It's a huge undertaking. I don't have time for all of it, but I also can't not do it. It's just required.
Right. Karen, would you put your email address in the chat so if people want to contact you? Chayla is beginning to craft a postcard, which are better than letters, because letters, some people don't even open it. Postcard is right there, they tend to look at it. And Karina has multiple pronged approach, phone calls for some, personal text support upon request. I mean, actually, Karina actually having like little consultations on how to use Zoom, for example? Is that what that means?
Yeah, I have kind of a team of people. They reach out to me if they want help, and then I kind of assign different volunteers, and they'll pick up the phone and walk them through it. Sometimes they'll even do a screen sharing if they're at that level. So they meet the people where they're at. Maybe it's how do you dial into a Zoom meeting? So we've just been, since it started, we've been really working one-on-one with people that way.
And Chris, you guys are doing a lot to get the word out, and I like maintain that presence so you don't disappear. What's your congregation again, Chris? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Probably easier to type it if you can't hear me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, I remember now. It's Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I remember now. Yeah, no, you're doing some really good stuff.
I think Sherry had her hand up too. Did we?
Yeah,
get to
she's
her?
been waiting patiently. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Sherry.
Hi, our congregation, actual members who have signed the book and are still somewhat active is roughly 220. We have a weekly newsletter that became bi-weekly or twice a week in March. And I've gone back to that because our minister has started sending out video messages 2 a week. So we have to do one on Tuesday and the other on Friday. And we send the newsletter to roughly 390 emails. So that's, since some of those represent 2 people each, I don't really know how many people we're reaching. But we have an average of 50% opened, which is fairly good. However, I've noticed since March, at the beginning when I was sending out the Tuesday newsletter, people were anxious for information, and I would have a lot of links embedded in articles, and they were avidly reading those. And that kind of tapered off. And so now I'm not going to all of that work anymore because I'm not opening them anymore. So I think people have got a little tired of that or are not as needy for the information. But what I wanted to ask you all about is, have you started any new small groups specifically to deal with pandemic issues? We have our Soul Matters groups, but that's rough. Other than committees, that's about the only small group that I know, meditation group and so on. But so I'm curious to know what you all are doing to help meet that need.
Nancy?
Sorry. We are this month without a minister. Our new settled minister is coming 1st of August. The other 2 ministers left the end of June, and they had started before they left. It happens to be on a Wednesday evening for us, the Joys and Sorrows. So people can get on a Zoom meeting and share that way. And then on Thursday nights, we have our adult RE by Zoom. Right now, they're watching some TED Talks. And then they started a coffee and muffin chat on Friday mornings, which I'm leading now, where people just want to casually get together and talk. Being an old Covenant Circle person, I inserted a question in that. That's our question for the week for discussion. And the attendance has fallen off drastically. So I guess they just want to get together and chat and not discuss some intentional question for me that was supposed to lead to personal development or something like that. So
How dare you suggest that?
I didn't actually say those words, but anyway, I'm leaving the question off this week.
Wow, interesting. As people have that need for more for social connection. Chayla, could you just come on and elaborate a little bit on what you put on the chat with your connection circles?
Yes. So, you know, back in the BP before the pandemic, I was always encouraging people, like, how would you want to get together? Like, what are your needs to meet, whatever? And so there were often ideas, but nobody wanted to take leadership. So I put out there were 4 suggestions for connection circles. One had to do with kind of accountability about creative projects. You know, like, what are you working on? How can we support each other? But that never launched. There were just like 3 people. Oh, there was another option of current events. Same thing, just a few. But living alone, mostly women in our congregation have joined that group, and there's 15 or more that meet every other week on Zoom just for a check-in and, you know, supporting one another. The poetry group, some people are sharing poetry that they're writing. Others are just sharing things that are, you know, personally meaningful. And then the spiritual check-in has also just had a few people, but just being able to take our temperatures on the spiritual level, however people define that. And then, as I also said, the minister and one of our congregants whose academic work had been in the study of racism and impacts on social groups have teamed up to lead a 21-day challenge. And we had, of a congregation of 320 members, 125 people signed up. And so this is like with a Wednesday night, you know, whoever wants to come, there's some content, some breakout rooms, discussion, and then daily readings and a Facebook group and a Monday noontime conversation opportunity. So, so there's some things happening, even though during July typically is when everything normally gets a little quieter. We've also, somebody said, our attendance is higher in July with Zoom than it has been in the last few years.
Yeah.
So we're, you know, we're still trying to find, you know, what do people need, or what would they be interested in participating in? And I do feel a sense of dread for the fall and winter because it gets very cold here in Central Oregon. So now people can go out and walk and meet socially distanced, but that's going to change. So.
Some just really wonderfully creative ideas. Thank you, Chayla. I'm going to call on the next spoke in order, Kirsten, and then Jeanette, and then Sarah.
You already talked to me. I had done the hand raise and then I just waved you down, so I'm good.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jeanette.
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. I thought those were amazing ideas with the connection circles, and the topics, I guess, some ways were doing, and I liked one of them in particular, the living alone as a small group topic. But the thing that occurs to me is that a lot of the people in our membership that might be dealing with that are older, seniors. And some of them, I think, are having issues with not really knowing how to use Zoom or not knowing it well enough and getting easily frustrated. And I know that there's a couple of congregations that are kind of doing like a, you know, a weekly Zoom check-in, you know, come and just sort of like an open office hour kind of a thing. And then so I was wondering if anyone here is doing something like that. I mean, how are you creating, like, you know, for lack of a better word, ageist inclusion, you know, for our seniors particularly? And then the other point of just communication that just kind of crossed my mind as we're talking. So we have the UUA theme on our website, and the homepage is really hard to edit. I mean, like, you can't, I mean, there's all these tiles and, you know, they're kind of static. They might be blog-like and have some content change. But if you want to have something right at the top that says, you know, some new information, you know, the only thing that was suggested to us was, oh, you can have a banner. But then we end up added so much to the banner that it now takes up like half the screen. And many people have just said, you know, the UUA theme is really hard to deal with change, and, you know, especially on the homepage. And I'm kind of wondering if anyone here is also using the UUA theme, and how are you dealing with getting this new information out by website?
Sarah, if it's okay, let me just call on Karina to respond to that and then quickly go to you.
So yeah, I agree with you with that. What I've done is in that rotating picture at the top, I've put a picture and you can link to that. So actually, I just used one of the blocks as kind of our community caring page. And so we're just pointing people there and they can see that image and it just goes to another page. It's not perfect. Sometimes I like using the bottom widgets because those are on every page. Even though it's at the bottom, it's still on every page. So not perfect, but I'd be happy to talk to you more about it later.
Thank you, Karina. Sarah?
I can weigh in on that Zoom tech question. We kind of have just a group of Zoom, like people in the congregation that have more tech skills. Not many, it's like 5 people, but we kind of, if somebody has issues with Zoom or isn't comfortable, we have an email address that goes to those people and they set up a time that's convenient for them to figure it out. So that's been helpful. I don't think we really try as a staff, because we're a small 8-person staff, we try to have the congregation own its work as much as possible because that's more sustainable. But anyway, what I was going to say about small group stuff, we have 2 weekly social hours. And one thing we've learned since we started, originally they were just general social hours. One was in the midday, one was in the evening during the week. But we've noticed that if we have a little bit of a focus, nothing hard, something really accessible that anybody can connect with, that's been super helpful. So we also have different people host it, congregants, members and friends, new members sometimes if they're comfortable with that. Staff will do it sometimes, but we have a theme like, what's your favorite book? What was your favorite book when you were a kid? Bring a poem, bring your dog, whatever. Describe a role model in your life, something like that. And that provides just something that's more relational, a little more deep, but that, nobody has to prep for it. They can just show up, have a cool conversation. So that's been really cool. And a lot of our programming is just not, we do have to deal with, the institutional change, the stuff coming out of General Assembly. We're going to have to put a lot of focus into how we view programming through that lens and create programming through that lens. But our more social programming is like, seriously, let's talk about The Good Place, like a TV show, since people are watching TV. Like, we're trying to keep it accessible and not as, heady as we tend to do, which I find exhausting sometimes.
That sounds great, Sarah. Thanks. I've been reading a couple of articles on loneliness, and it's particularly acute now, and not just among older people, but younger people as well are feeling extremely lonely during this time. I can just add to all the other great ideas. In our religious education director holds a show and tell for kids every week. And they won't let me on it because I'm too old, but I'm told that it's working really, really well, and kids are really enjoying it. Anything new on the chat, Karen?
Just lots of really good ideas that make me want to join all your churches. Some really fun stuff that's going on. And so, yeah, definitely save the chat if you're looking for ideas. There's a lot there. Yeah, just lots of activities.
Great. Any other, we just have a few minutes left. Any other thoughts, questions, information that topics that we maybe didn't touch on that you were hoping that we would today?
Um, Mark, are we going to have a way that we can share those of us who've put out a statement or crafting them now, some way to get those where we can share them? That was really helpful when we did ours, was to see other people's.
When you say statement, I mean statement, things that we're broadcasting to the congregations?
Opening up messages, opening up policies, or wording, that sort of stuff.
The only thing I can, if people want to send them to me, I have the email list of everyone who was on the call. I can send them out. Some people may not want them, but that's okay. If the person sending me the information is okay with me sending it to everybody else,
Okay.
then I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Let me put my email address in here.
Yes. Look in the chat if there's Michael is asking about how many people got PPP money. So several people are weighing in there as well.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, that's good to see. Great. Yeah, we got that as well. So I want to thank all of you for this time together. Nancy, you unmuted. Did you want to share something? No, you did. Okay. And Jeanette, your hand is still up. Is that from before? Okay, that's fine. I wanted to make sure I didn't want to cut anybody off before we adjourned. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. If you want to send me in any information that you want to broadcast to your colleagues, I'll be happy to send it out on your behalf. Maybe Karen and I will do this in another couple of months, and it looks like we're going to have the opportunity. We're not going to be back to the way things were. So thank you all, everybody. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you again.
Well, that was very dynamic. My goodness. We're in a different place, aren't we, than we were with those first series?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have, they're much more active in what they're doing. I still was kind of surprised that a pretty significant percentage either haven't started planning yet or it's just underway.
You're still recording. Did you want to be?
Oh, darn. Thank you for reminding me.